That was from the trailer for Polite Society. This is the plot summary from IMDb. Ria Khan believes she must save her older sister, Alina, from her impending marriage. After enlisting her friend's help, she attempts to pull off the most ambitious of all wedding heists in the name of independence and sisterhood. This movie is written and directed by Nida Manzoor. We are going to discuss our one-sentence reactions to this movie and whether you should go see it before diving immediately into spoilers. Jeff Kanata, really curious what you thought of Polite Society. And should people go see it?
Oh, should people go see it? I was disappointed with this movie. I do think there's a lot of fun to be had. I wouldn't say don't go see it. It takes place in a culture that doesn't get a lot of representation in big movies. And I think that part of it is really fun. And some of the characters are very fun. And I think the first half of this movie is really fun. I was super disappointed by the second half. We'll get into it in spoilers, but I just didn't like where the movie went. And so I was pretty disappointed by the movie. But it is pretty fun and perhaps worth checking out.
I had almost an identical reaction, except I would say the first 2/3 of the movie. You know,
Yeah,
the final third that
fair.
really got let down. And the first 2/3, I just want to say, I think I had higher highs than Jeff. I was thinking to myself,
oh, I was
this
loving
is like
it.
This is like one of my favorite movies of 2023. Like watching the first movie, I was like, this is incredible, love this. And then I was also disappointed by the ending. Devindra Hardawar. I think you've recommended it in the past, but I'll give you an opportunity to just reiterate what you had to say about this movie in the past.
I did. I mean, I love this movie. I think it's funny. I think the action's great. I think it does cast a lens on folks that don't typically get featured in movies or anything, really. So I love Nida Manzoor and I love We Are Lady Parts. And I think this one is equally as good. I agree. There's some sci-fi elements toward the end that don't quite work, but also what it represents is kind of hilarious and also not something that I think a movie has ever really fully explored. So I love imperfect movies. This is definitely an imperfect movie, but the highs are so high. Definitely see if you can. And I think it's worth the theater because it looks good. The action looks good.
Let's dive into spoilers for Polite Society. But so in terms of the first 2/3, the relationship between Ria and Lena, I think just really, really works. Ritu Arya plays Lena, Priya Kansara plays Ria. And I think they just do such a wonderful job, particularly Priya Kansara, who I've never seen before in anything. I don't think this is like the first movie I've seen her. I think she was in Bridgerton for a couple episodes, but she's wonderful. And the first 2/3 of the movie, I think, really all the characters are great. The parents are great. The friends are great. It's just this is feels like classic Sundance. This feels like one of those movies that
Sundance.
It would have been purchased, 15 years ago, and then they would have released it. It would have made like $50 million at the box office. That's what it felt like to me. Yeah.
If it had very big Scott Pilgrim vibes.
Yeah,
right?
It did.
Yeah.
Which is a movie I like a lot.
Yeah, I believe Nida Manzoor talked with Edgar Wright about this movie too. So Scott
really?
Pilgrim was part of the framing of it. Yeah,
I honestly think structurally the movie is very similar to The World's End from Edgar Wright, where you have a character who has kind of these personal issues, and then this outside alien force comes in, and you need to or sci-fi force comes in, you need to deal with it and help resolve your issues that way. But yes, as Devindra hinted at in the pre-spoiler, this movie worked really well for me when it was a coming of age story about this character trying to deal with her sister going off and doing her own thing and living her own life. That is a very, very relatable feeling, a relatable situation. And all that stuff really worked for me. And then you see how this character, Ria, starts to alienate even her closest friends in her pursuit of this mission.
Yep.
And how damaging it can be. Right?
And she's spiraling into a real kind of manic, unhinged view of the world. And the fact that the movie then validates all of that.
They certainly could have connected it better. But I do think the initial conflict is her sister just not knowing what to do in life. Right. And it is... her sister's late mid-20s, somebody who's going through college and dropped out of art school, and Ria's a teenager, and to her the world is so much simpler. It's very black and white. You fight for your dreams, you do what you want, right? And that's it. Your life will work out. The movie is very much about that
and the
tension.
movie is on her side. The movie is on her side. That is ultimately the worldview that emerges from the film.
It does push back a lot against that, but also I think by the end, I forget if the sister is even saying I'll go back to art school. It's more oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's okay. I think it is, it is on her side because she's the protagonist and we're kind of following her with it. But I also don't think the movie excuses a lot of her behavior early on too. So
yeah, that's what was great about the movie. I thought was she's doing all these things, and in particularly when she plants the condoms, it's like that is when it's like it goes beyond, it's over the line. And then I thought to myself, oh, the rest of the movie is going to be about how like she and her sister can still reconcile and be, you know, a unit after all these terrible things that have happened. And that it's okay to let things go. It's interesting. We just watched this Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We just reviewed that on the Filmcast. And that is a movie about how it is okay to let go. And we get this movie, which, I think has the opposite message, you know, which is that
I think we kind of get there. But
tell me how we get there, because at the end of the movie, as Jeff said, I think like everything that the main character Rhea's fears are validated, right? So I think we as the audience, yes, maybe some of the ways that Rhea took to get there were not great, but it's like at the end of the day, Rhea was right? And Rhea also gets everything she wants, you know, like her sister doesn't go off, the stunt woman writes back to her. It just felt like this weird fantasy when like the first 2/3 of the movie, despite having some fantastical elements, like with the fighting and everything, still felt very grounded to me.
Like I said, I think the sci-fi elements of this movie could have been connected better. I think by the ending is them reconnecting as sisters and not being just like, well, I'm gonna go back to art school. I'm gonna go, you know, do everything we initially planned. You know, like it to me, like that we didn't know if that was going to be happening. I do want to say, like, yeah, I wish the writing had connected what Rhea was worried about better to, you know, to the actual like sci-fi plot that's happening here. But I also think a lot of it rests on Nimra Bucha as Rahila, as the mother, you know, of the groom, and I think she does a good job of just conveying a sense of sinisterness, like throughout this whole situation too. And it is very much a class difference. It is a difference in their homes and the way she's living, but it's also the difference in the way like she is treating, you know, she's kind of treating Rhea's family as well. The relationship between her and the son is really funny because it is one of those things people talk about where a mother will like overmother, you know, their prized firstborn boy, you know, and this is the funny part is it's like the logical conclusion of that. It is the mother, you know, doing the machinations to make sure she is always with her son, even if it literally means he's kind of marrying her in a certain way or her being reborn to him. So I think that's all really funny. But yeah, you guys are right. Like I do think the writing could have like connected a lot of these things better.
You know, when you say connected, right? It does. Here are some things that the movie I think does really well, and I'll start by saying, you know, I don't think any of us are experts in South Asian courtship and mating rituals and so on. So like,
I mean, I'm not an expert, but I've heard many things. Yes,
we have some passing knowledge of it, and I think what's great about the movie is it does something that I think a lot of great movies do well, which is you take a latent anxiety or practice or whatever, and you make it into like, you exaggerate it to its logical extreme. So in this case, it's this idea of there being power imbalances when it comes to these matches that are made or arranged marriages, right? And oftentimes the woman is expected to just be to be crass about it, like a breeding machine, right? You know, like she is reduced to her parts. And this movie is like, what if we did that but for real? Like it was actually like scientifically, like that was the sole purpose of what they were trying to accomplish. Yeah. And Devindra, as you point out, the relationship between the guy and his mom is also like really well rendered as well, I think, and it's kind of like an exaggerated version of
it's a very mama's boy where it's like, thing.
Not only does this woman who is his mom want to choose who he marries, like she literally wants to become her, right? And that's like a really cool kind of Get Out style idea as well, that I think is like interesting to explore. I just think that those ideas shouldn't have been attached to the other movie, right?
I agree.
Like shouldn't have been attached to this like very grounded, touching, funny coming of age story.
What the beginning of the movie is establishing is that Rhea is living in a fantasy world where there's good and evil and things that are, by the movie's own set of rules, feel a little immature and unrealistic to the world. What Rhea is learning as her sister is experiencing these things and she's butting up against adults in that world is that, hey, maybe my sort of overly simplistic view of things isn't going to serve me well in life, right? Maybe, I'm trying to put the world in these boxes of good and evil, and these people are evil, and then the movie goes, except for these people actually are evil, cartoonishly so.
But in this case, she was right.
Exactly. And so it completely undermines all of the work that's done in the beginning of the movie to kind of create a much more nuanced, interesting story of this coming of age, this woman, this young woman who is realizing that the world is more complex, and she can retain some of that ideology or some of that idealism. She can retain that. Like that, we're rooting for her to still have her ideals by the end, right? And still want to go for her dreams and support her sister's dreams and all those things. But what the movie just goes in this like, well, because the world is completely cartoonish and you were right about them being super villains, like it becomes detached from any kind of grounded, realistic message that we can pull away, because it's like, oh, this is just cartoon logic now.
I absolutely agree completely. Sorry, Jeff, didn't mean to.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Because I loved what this movie was doing through most of it. I was so on board with her journey and her discovery and using the tools of fantasy and genre and her imagination. Like, I never thought that her fight, that it would come up with like so-and-so versus so-and-so and have these cool fights. I never interpreted that in the logic of the movie as a literal representation of what was happening in that world. I always thought we are seeing this filtered through the fantastical imagination of our main character. And I was on board. That's awesome. Like, kind of in a Scott Pilgrim way. Like, that's not the real truth of what's happening. But by the end of the movie, it's like, no. That was the real truth of what's happened. Like, we're in a cartoon. And I just think that didn't do the movie any service.
I can see that. I totally see what you guys are saying. I'm saying it's doing both. And when you try, I think it does show her growth. Like, she kind of does learn most of the lessons of like, okay, like maybe I do have to let my sister grow after a certain point, and then start seeding the truly evul elements in the more sci-fi
it's
stuff.
True. She kind of learns the lesson.
She does.
And then is like, but I was still right in this. That's kind of, so it's not like she doesn't learn it. It's not like she has no growth at all. I would agree with that. That was a clip from the Filmcast After Dark. To get access to the whole episode, go to patreon.com/filmpodcast. You can sign up for ad-free episodes as well as exclusive After Darks. You can find the regular podcast at thefilmcast.com. And of course, like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.